continue? Okay, no problem.
Yes, no.
Go ahead.
No, I was wondering what page are we starting?
Okay, today is page 231. 231. Okay. And just so you know, it's actually to everybody. I have a very old editions of these books, very old editions. So sometimes the text is a little different, but commentary is different, but it's mostly the same. So, for example, I'll give you an example. We got to Talmud in Bava Metzia, and we're doing commentary, and my is the older one. I mean, maybe like from 2009 edition, and the other person, my Chavrusa, has a 2016 edition. So one part they completely remadiva, completely. So it is like almost impossible to follow each other. Okay, we just got a shock of our life, but I mean, how could they change so much? But with these books also, it could be like if you have a different edition. At least I know a few problems with this edition. I know the errors. I mean, but because we found it before, like some time ago. So when I read it correctly, or pictures. I know what was there, but they were fixed since then. Okay, so page 231. So, and our big topic is broth and juice of fruits and vegetables. Okay, so halacha number 2. This CF differentiates between the blessings on a broth of the fruit that were grown for a raw consumption, and the broth of the fruit that were planted for the purpose of being dried and cooked. Okay. So as we said before, it's not everybody agrees. So, but we're going to see what the final halacha is. Okay. So one more time. So this thief differentiate between the blessing of broth of the fruit, meaning there is no fruit. There are no fruits itself. They cook the fruit, remove the fruits, and they just want to drink the liquid, the broth, right? Of the fruit that were grown for raw consumption. So meaning the first case would be the fruits that were grown just to eat them, and the broth of the fruit that were planted for the purpose of being dried and cooked. So and these dry fruits, you have dry apples, plums, apricots, all these beautiful dry fruits. So in old country, that's how people get the vitamins in the winter, right? So they buy these dry fruits and cook them. They call it compote. Okay. Okay, so commentary say, in early times, when no means of wide-scale distribution and practical storage of fresh fruits existed, fruits were often preserved by drying them, exactly, after which they were stored and cooked and eaten in a later time. Since the large amount of the produce could not be used immediately, fruits that were planted in abundance were almost certainly grown for drying and cooking. So of course, I mean, if you have a lot of apples and they're all ripening at the same time, so what exactly are you going to do? You cannot sell. People cannot eat so many apples. So they would dry them, right, and you use it throughout the winter. Okay. So I'm sure that's what they do, still doing in many countries, not rich countries, but not such rich countries. Okay, continue. With regard to the fruits, so today we have refrigerators, so it's easier to preserve fresh fruit. But in olden days, in my days, I mean, I'm not that old, but that's what we did. Right. With regard to those fruits that are not normally cooked, but eaten raw, if one cooked them, he recites shechakal blessing upon the broth. Okay, so we're not talking about the fruits, right? As in the previous sifrim, we were talking about, was it the previous one? Yeah, in the previous one, we're talking about the blessing on the fruit. So blessing on the fruit, of course, let's say you can eat raw, or you can cook them, right, and eat cooked apples. So for cooked apple, for sure you're going to say misappropriates. There is no question about it, right? But for a broth, that's a different story. So if it was this grown, right, only for eating, and now eating raw, and now you cook them. So Kitzur say on the broth you say shechakol. Okay. Number 7. A blessing on a broth is required only when one drinks the broth by itself. If, however, he drinks broth while eating the fruit, we assume that he was primarily interested in the fruit and recited misappropriates. Okay. A lot of details. So let's see what it says here. And just to remind us, so not to get confused. When we were talking in a previous section, when we were talking about vegetables, and we were talking about soups, right? So we said that this broth from soup, where we have when we cook vegetables, potatoes, carrots, cabbage, all of this beautiful stuff, right? So the broth became like vegetables, so you say if you would drink it separately. If you want only broth, for example, a person is sick, cannot eat, right, sore throat, only drink the vegetable broth, no problem. So you don't say shechakol, you say because that was primary intention to cook this vegetable in a soup. So here is a little different. So usually people don't cook fruits. Sometimes, as we said, especially olden times, but not mostly not. So as we said, they call it in Yiddish. It's in other language. It's compote. These things with the fruits, right? So you usually have all of the fruits. You eat fruits with a spoon, and you drink the liquid. So fruits, of course, the most important part. So you say. You say blessing on the fruits, and this liquid, this broth is covered. So that's exactly what this commentary is saying. So let me read one more time, just so we remember. So it says the blessing on the broth is required only when one drinks the broth by itself. So if you don't want fruits, they call it schmutz. Schmutz, it's in English it's almost like garbage, like you don't want something, right? They call it schmutz. Okay, so if you want to drink the liquid, so you would say this blessing, right? But if you eat it with the fruits, so this liquid is covered. If, however, he drinks the broth while eating fruit, we assume that he was primarily interested in the fruit and recite misappropriates on it. So as we said before many times, but just to remind us, on one dish we say only one blessing, only one. So it depends. We go by majority. What is right? If there is a clearly one is more important than the second, so you say on the more important, even if it's minority, right? But if it's you don't have any preference, so you go by majority. And the third opinion is what you like most. Okay, so it depends. So here we assume that a person wants to eat fruits. Okay. No blessing is recited on broth, as we said, if it is deemed to subordinate 48:10. Yeah, we did primary subordinate with it. Okay, see Mishnah Brura 2:54, Shar Hatziyun, okay, etc. Okay, so no problem. So continue. So let me read this sentence one more time. With regard to those fruits that are not normally cooked, but eaten raw, if one cooks them, one says shechakol blessing upon the broth. Okay, so on fruits, as we said, blessing does not change. But fruits whose usual manner is to be dried and cooked, they are found in abundance. and are planted for that purpose, right? Okay, so let's stop here. So today, even though they sell dry fruits on internet in the store, but like mostly the way I understand it, it's like for somebody in a diet, like a snack, like low calorie snacks, and something tasty. That's how these fruits are used. Like very rarely, only juice would cook this dish from them. But other people, like in general, they don't cook them. They just eat them like in dry form, which is no problem. They're tasty. So one more time, but the fruits, the usual manner to be dried and cooked. So that's for sure. That's how they were prepared for dried and cooked. Kitzur is describing common practice in those times, which was to plant crops in abundance for the purpose of drying the produce and then cook them in a later time. Right, so of course, as we said, the season is the season. There are no refrigerators. Of course, they have the storages like under the ground, but sometimes the mice would come, or other insects would come. So it was not so simple to preserve them, all of these fruits, right? Okay, so they would dry them. However, the same ruling applies if they were planted for cooking without being dried first. Okay. For the ultimate issue here is whether they were planted for the purpose of cooking. Okay, so it's Mishnah Brura 252. So Mishnah Brura says, okay, sometimes you would have special types of apples. Right, I don't have any specific example of this what type, right? So they are only good when you cook them. Maybe too sour. That's what my guess is. So they will cook it maybe with honey, sugar, and other fruits, so it would be delicious. Okay, so that doesn't matter. They were dry. They dried in order to cook them, or as Mishnah Brura says, or they were simply even fresh, but were grown to be cooked, right? And they are found in abundance and are planted for that purpose, meaning mostly for preservation. Of course, you would eat like some of them as when fresh, you have these fresh apples, but mostly made to dry them. And in olden days, I don't think they would do like apple juice. Like apple juice, only they would like fresh from the apple, and they would sell. But otherwise, to preserve it, to pasteurize it, I don't think so. They would do it in olden days. I don't think so. Okay. Continue. This depends on the original intention. So it's commentary. Intention at the time of the planting, and not upon what is usually once they were dried. So that's a very critical line, right? And we actually use this logic in our Halachos of Brochos, and we apply it to orange trees, right? Today, so some orange trees they grown specifically for to produce juice, right? Not as a fruit. So one more time, this depends upon the original intention at the time of planting, and the time of planting the trees, not right at the planting the tree, and not upon what is usually usual once they're dried. Okay. Thus, if the fruit are normally eaten raw, then although some people dry them, and once they are dried, it is common to cook them, they still consider fruit whose usual manner is not to be eaten cooked, and the subject to a previous ruling of the Kitzur. And one recites shechakol upon the broth. Okay. So I guess in here what commentators say is a situation when you do not know. So you bought the orchard, right, from somebody else. So you have no idea for what was the intention where we were planting, let's say. Right, so one more time. Thus, if the fruits are normally eaten raw, so I mean these apples, right, then although some people dry them, okay, let's say, and once they're dried, it's common to cook them. So I mean, one follows another. They are still considered fruit whose usual manner is not being cooked. So meaning, if the usual way to only to eat raw, right? Even though some people dry them and would cook, or I mean, it's like a general statement, right? So we continue that like it was grown for eating raw. So why? Because it's what other people do. So we say shechakol on the broth. Continue. If he cooked them in order to eat the fruit and also to drink broth, he recites HaRim's blessing on a broth, even if it is not partaking the fruit. So too with regard to legumes and vegetables. Okay, okay, let's stop here. So that's, I mean, actually we commented early on this, but exactly the same idea as we said before. If he cook them in order to eat fruit, so meaning the same applies if he soak them in water for minimum 24 hours, and the water absorbs the flavor. Shulchan Aruch 2:10, Mishnah Brura, etc. etc. BeEzrat, the pickling. Okay, so if we soak the fruit and the water absorb the taste. So I guess if you're talking about apples, I think you would have to cut them, right? So in the water absorb the taste for 24 hours. So it's we say HaRim on this water, right? Because why? Once again, because that was the intention. Same for fruits, same for vegetables. It was intention to eat them cooked, right, and drink this broth. So one more time, the whole sentence. If he cooked them in order to eat fruit and also drink the broth, right? He recited HaRim's blessing on the broth, even if he not partake in the fruit. So meaning that broth is like primary, same. It's same as a fruit, continuation of the fruit. So same as we said, example that we gave before about soup, vegetable soup. So too with regard to the legumes and vegetables, in a place where the usual manner is to cook them, in order to eat them as well as to drink the broth, one recite the blessing HaRim, okay, who creates the fruit of the ground on a broth, even if he is not eating the solid food. So it's very interesting. So he said, okay, soup, everybody understands soup, example, right? With vegetables, with potatoes and carrots and cabbage, right? Everybody understands. But here it's very, very interesting. So even if they have some kind of beans, right? Some kind of beans, right? And it's usually, so it's they don't call it soup. They don't call it soup. I guess it would be, for example, if you cook potatoes, right? You want to cook potatoes. So if you decide to drink that broth, which is, I mean, there's no problem. Usually people like pour it out, but like technically, if you think about it, there is nothing wrong with that. You can drink if you want, right? It's salty, I think, enough salt, or you can add whatever you add, and you have yourself a dish. So this liquid would require like HaRim. Okay. Or they soaked, or if it's fruit, so you say HaRim. That's how the liquid gets the same blessing as the fruit of the ground or fruit of the tree. Continue. So again, it was like specifically, intentionally cooked for the fruits and for the broth. Continue. Kitzur contrasts this ruling that the blessing on the broth and the fruits and vegetables, even though he is not partaking the actual fruit and vegetable, with the ruling can sif one. So we did last time sif one. And the blessing of the juice extracted from fruit and the vegetable shechakol. Okay, so let's try like its introduction. So this article publisher did like amazing thing Like, okay, you can read Kitzur, it's very good for you, but they state the question why Kitzur is saying whatever he's saying. So one more time, we're going to explain. Kitzur contrasts this ruling that the blessing on the broth and the fruit of vegetables chayetz or chadama, right? So as we said, as we just said, in all of these cases that all of the situation that we just discussed. So even if a person is going to cook like potatoes in the soup, make soup, right? On a broth, for example, he does not want to eat these potatoes, only the broth. So he would say "Borei chadama" for sure, right? Or cooked apples, and he does not want to eat apples, just the broth. So he would say "Borei chayetz," no problem. So far so good, right? So and even though he's not going to eat the fruits and vegetables, only on the broth by itself. If he eats fruits and the vegetables, that's given you, as we said before, you say blessing on the vegetable or fruit, and the broth is covered because it's secondary. Okay, but here the broth is the only food. Okay, so we comparing this situation with what? With the rule in the CF1 that the blessing on the juice extracted from a fruit and the vegetables is shechakol. So now, okay, I understand that we cook these potatoes in the water or these apples in the water, and you say this borei chayetz or borei chadama, right? But when you squeeze apple or you squeeze carrots and you extract juice, why do you say shechakol? So that's the bottom line question, which is very interesting. Okay, even though I think we answered before, but let's see. The reason for this difference between this and what was explained in CF1, meaning the juice that was squeezed from fruits or vegetables, is a matter of dispute. Some authorities say that the blessing on the juice extracted by the squeezing the fruit and the vegetable is shechakol, because there is speaking of the case where it is not normal manner to squeeze the fruit and the vegetables in order to extract juice. So now we're going by intention, right? By intention. So in the first sieve that we learned last time, so we said that when we extract the juice, it's not part of the juice. It's not like a juice. We said is not part of the vegetable. Is a sweat, whatever it means, sweat of the vegetables, right? And it's not part of the vegetables or part of the fruit. That's why we say shechakol, totally separate blessing. It's like, okay, continue. While right, and there we were talking about the fruits or vegetables usually not being squeezed. I mean, of course you can squeeze, but not usually done so. While here it is the usual manner to cook the fruits and vegetable in a broth. Right, so there is unusual, and here is you doing something that is usual. Okay, let's see the commentaries. According to this opinion, Rashba to Bracha story 8a, right, the borei chayetz blessing is not appropriate for a fruit juice of the fruit that are usually not squeezed for their juice. Okay, nor it is appropriate for the broth of fruits that are usually not cooked. Okay. In addition, in order to borei chayetz to be appropriate blessing, according to this opinion, the fruit trees must be planted for that purpose, as mentioned in the Kitzur earlier. So let's do this commentary one more time, and we're going to explain. There are a few ideas that we must understand. So according to this opinion, the borei chayetz blessing is not appropriate for the juice of the fruit that they usually not squeeze for their juice. So, and again, we're going by initial intention when the trees were planted, not what, for example, not after we bought this orchard from somebody else and we decided that we're going to use these apples for apple juice, right? It's not, right? So it goes by original intention. So since most of the apple are not used for apple juice, right? So that's why we say shechakol. So one more time, and we continue. The it's a blessing is not appropriate for juice of fruits that are usually not squeezed for their juice. We just explained. Nor it is appropriate for a broth of the fruits that usually not cooked. So apples, usually people don't eat, don't cook apples. So now they decided to cook apples, and most of the people still don't do it. So okay, no problem. So it says shechakol on this broth, if you drink it separately, of course. In addition, in order to for Rechettably to be appropriate blessing, according to this opinion, the fruit trees must be planted for that purpose, as mentioned in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Right, the fruit trees must be planted. Okay, so we explain all of this. Continue. 1 second, sorry. So let me just go back one sentence, even though it's long, but so we have continuation. So Kitzur have Kitzur and other great poskim have like a very long sentence, and sometimes it's unending, but that's how they wrote their works. Like if you look at HaKadosh HaRim, sometimes it's like 5 or 6 or 7 lines, one sentence. Okay, so for continuation purposes. The reason for the difference between this and whatever we said in CF1 is a matter of dispute. Some authorities say that the blessing of the juice extracted from squeezing the fruit and the vegetable is shechakol, because there is there it speaks of a case where it is not usual manner, okay, to squeeze the fruits and the vegetables in order to extract juice, while here it is the usual manner to cook these fruits and vegetables for their broth. So when they dry it, right, as we explained. Okay, so now continue. And there are other authorities who say that it is better, that it is because of the flavor of the actual fruit and the vegetable absorbed to a great extent in the water in which they are cooked, then it is that is present in the juice that flows from them. So for this we would need an explanation, because Kitzur says that this let's say we cook these apples in the water, and so this water is preserved better flavor than when we squeeze this apple for juice. I mean, it's not so simple. So let's see the logic. Commentary number 12. So it says this opinion, Rosh and Brocha 6:18, distinguishes between a broth in which the liquid absorbs the usual flavor of the fruit of the vegetables, and a squeezed juice which does not contain the essence of the fruit. According to these opinions, even if the fruit is usually squeezed for the juice, we recite shechakol on the juice. So, I mean, we explained it before, but let's do it again, and just to repeat our explanation. I mean, he explained a little different, but I mean not different, but he added few details. So one more time. This opinion distinguishes between broth, in which the liquid absorbed the actual flavor of the fruit, meaning it was soaked or cooked, right? We cooked our apples or soaked our apples in this water, right? Fruits or vegetables, and squeezed juice. So we would assume that logically the squeezed juice would have more essence of the fruit. That's not what halacha is, which does not contain the essence of the fruit. So juice does not contain the essence of the fruit. It's very interesting. According to this opinion, even the fruits is usually squeezed for juice, right? One recites shechakol on them. So since there is no preserved flavor, no preserved essence in this what is it in this juice, so we say shechakol. So in water, yes. In juice, no. Okay, so that's why we say always, according to this opinion, we say shechakol on the juice. Okay, and that's actually the bottom line. That's we always say shechakol on the Jews, unless you know for sure that these trees were grown only for this specific. They were planted for that specific purpose. So then that's a different story. Since no decision is rendered in this dispute, the shechakol blessing, which all-encompassing blessing, is recited as long as the condition of both opinion have not been fulfilled. Okay. So exactly as we said. So today, like since we don't know like that the trees were specifically like planted for Jews only. So a second opinion. So okay. So we say shechakol. Thus, ha'etz is recited only in a case of presented by Kitzur in this year. That is on a broth of the fruit that is usually cooked and was planted for this purpose. Right. So if you know that this fruit was planted in order to be cooked, so that's a different story. Nevertheless, one who is mistakenly say borepri on a juice of a fruit that usually is squeezed for a juice does not have to repeat another blessing, since it has recited proper blessing according to first opinion. So, and commentators say, very interesting. So, if somebody made a mistake, and as we always say, like if the statement not true, so meaning if it's still like even though it's not correct blessing, but after the fact, whatever we said, it is true, right? So we're not allowed, even forget about obligated. We're not allowed to say a second blessing. We have to stick with the original blessing. So if somebody said borepri on this juice, so we just leave it, or on this liquid broth, on the broth from after cooking apples. Conversely, one who recited borepri on a broth of a fruit that is not normally cooked does not recite another blessing. Okay. So, of course, we're talking about after the fact. Since this is the appropriate blessing according to the second opinion. So, in case of the need and in order not to transgress a biblical prohibition of saying Hashem's name in vain, so what do? We just we don't. If there is some opinion, lenient opinion that we can rely on, not to repeat the blessing, that's what we do. Okay. So continue. So it's very long here, but that's what it is. So continue. Kitzur addresses the condition mentioned earlier that the blessing on a broth is ha'etz or hadama only when it was cooked for the sake of broth, for the sake of both the fruit and the broth. Okay, so that's very interesting thing, and we're going to explain. So one more time, Kitzur addresses the condition. The condition mentioned earlier when the blessing on the broth is ha'etz or hadama only when it was cooked for the sake of both fruit and the broth. I'm not, in my mind, like it's always or at least almost always. It is cooked for the reasons of the fruit and for what is it and for a vegetable or like for a broth and the fruits. But I just thought about it. There's example, like clear example. So on during the Pesach, I mean the product is in the store all year round. But very often people buy this canned soup, like a beets soup. They call it borscht. Like I think the company is Golds. Right? They've been in the market for I don't know 100 years or more. I don't know how many, long time ago. And it's actually they cook the beets like in different styles. Well, there's several styles, but they sell in this jar, right? In this jar they sell only the broth. That's it. So you put vegetables. You do whatever you want with that. So it's called kosher Pesach. Very interesting. I think like everywhere that we went in all of the even in Arizona or somewhere, like in all of the like remote stores, they always sell it because it's, I guess, ready food and healthy, I guess, in some sense. Okay. So in this case, for sure, you say Borepri Chadama on this broth, for sure, right? Because it was, of course, the vegetable is not there. I'm not sure what they do with the bits. That's a different story. But for sure, it was cooked for the purpose of this broth. Not right. Vegetable is not there. So for this this kind of soup, you say Borepri Chadama. Okay. So continue with the Kitzur. So it says, but if the purpose of the cooking is only for the sake of the fruit of the vegetable, right? There is a purpose to prepare fruit or the vegetable, not fruit or the vegetable broth. Then, if one does not eat the fruits or the vegetables, but only drinks broth, he recites Shechakol blessing. So that's let's try to understand. So they say if you use this liquid only to cook vegetables. So I think that the perfect example would be, as we said before, potatoes, right? You wanna eat mashed potatoes. So how do you make it? You cook, right? You cook potatoes, and usually people dispose of the water. But let's say for some reason you decided to drink this broth, this water, right? So in this case, you would say shechakol, because why? Because that's not the purpose that why you use this water. You use this water is only in the medium to cook potatoes. So in this case, you say shechakol. But soup, when we're talking about soup, for sure, you're planning to eat fruit, or I mean vegetable, or so BeEzrat, and drink liquid. So that's why in a soup you say Borepri Chadama if you drink like this liquid separately, right? This broth. But when you let's say you have potato soup, you cook potato soup, right? And if you decided to eat mashed potatoes and you boil these cooked potatoes in this in the water, so on that water you would say shechakol. Continue. We're almost done, and we can ask the questions because I want us to be very, very clear. I mean, it's simple. We repeated a few times the same information, but just to make sure that it settles in our minds. Because okay. However, if we cook the fruits and the vegetables together with meat, even if the purpose of the cooking was for the sake of broth as well, he always recites shechakol blessing on the broth. For the flavor of the meat or broth is primary. So it's very interesting addition. So Kitzur says, so you have fruits with vegetables, but you also have a piece of meat. So I mean, vegetables, let's say even majority, meat is minority, right? And sometimes they cook for soup. If you want very tasty soup, so you would get the bones, the neck bones, right? To make the soup like flavor, right? Good flavor. So in this case, the meat flavor would be primary. So even though the meat was my minority, so on this broth, they say you say shechakol always. Okay. You say shechakol always, but let's try to understand. But if we eat this soup, so then we're going to say the blessing on majority. So if you have a majority of vegetables and just like few pieces of meat, so of course you're going to say Borepri Chadama on vegetables, and soup is covered, even the meat is covered. Just so we're on the same page. Again, we say on one dish we say only one blessing. If it is mixed, if it's separate, like you have a quarter of chicken in that soup, so of course the chicken is not mixed with the soup. It's two separate dishes. But we're talking about when you have like pieces of meat or pieces of chicken, like cut in small pieces. So in this case, only one blessing. If majority vegetables, you say vegetables. Continue with note number 13. Is somebody following? Number 13. So it says, when eating mixture of foods, One, recite the blessing of a primary ingredient as explained below. Okay, primary ingredients, or okay, we did not get to it. It's actually in the next chapter. It's 54 and 53. Okay. Therefore, one who eats the broth of meat and vegetables too, by itself recite only shechakol, which is the blessing on the meat, since the flavor of the meat in the broth is considered more important than the flavor of the vegetables. So here, Kitzur say a little different from what we said, and there is such an opinion. So you say that you like this meat better, much better. So meaning that the meat is for you is primary. So the only reason that you have the meat stew, right? As he said, right? Meat stew. So the only reason you eat these potatoes is only to enhance meat. That's it. So if meat is primary, you say the blessing on the meat, as we said before. If you don't have primary and secondary, so you say the blessing on majority. Okay. However, continue. However, meat takes precedence only when the broth was originally cooked together with both meat and vegetables. If one first cooked the broth with vegetables only, and the broth assumes the Hadamah blessing of the vegetables, which it retains even as subsequently add meat to the vegetables, and broth and cooked them together. See, Mishnah Brura is explained Igras Moshe. So I'm not sure how common is this scenario, and I'm going to explain why. The way I understand, so the meat is cooked. You need much longer time to cook meat. So usually they start cooking meat, cook for whatever hours, and then they would add vegetables to the same liquid. So but here is in this scenario it's not like this. So they say they start cooking vegetables and broth separately without meat, and then they added meat later on and cooked it together. Okay, so in this case you on a broth you say Borei Hadamah because of this change of the sequence. So because this water is saturated with vegetables, not with meat. Okay. So, but if it was cooked all together, so and the meat flavor is the more predominant, so we say shechakol on the broth. Continue. If one eats the vegetables together with broth, the Hadamah blessing recited on the vegetables exempt broth as well. Okay, we said that before. Okay, so if one eats vegetables with the broth, the broth and the vegetables same blessing Hadamah. Okay, no problem. Moreover, one must recite Hadamah on the vegetables even if he is also eating the meat. For vegetables are not considered secondary to the meat. So one more time. If one eats the vegetables together with the broth, the Hadamah blessing is recited, vegetables exempt the broth as well. Okay, we said it. So the last sentence is very interesting, so we're going to explain. Moreover, one must recite Hadamah blessing, Hadamah on the vegetables, even if he is also eating meat. For vegetables are not considered secondary to the meat. Usually, we will need to see the situation. It's Mishnah Brura 205:13. But usually, as we said, we say only one blessing on the mixture. So if like pieces of meat, like big chunks of meat, like big chunks, so they're not mixed in one spoonful. So in this case, yeah, you would say it's separate blessing on the meat, but otherwise it's one blessing because it's not mixed. Okay. So let me see the time. Any questions on what we said?